there is no question whether freelance is good or not for the company. Obviously, it's a great benefit. But I'd like to delve deeper into the practicalities of how to start hiring freelancers, what to watch for, what sort of steps to be made, and many other things. And I couldn't do it alone, of course. I have excellent professionals joining me today for this panel. And I'd like to introduce them. Ladies first. So Hannah is Partner and Corporate Solutions Manager from CXC Global. CXC works with companies and helping them to hire freelancers or contingent workers, as they call them. Barbara is founder of Go-To Freelance, which is a freelance community in years, and she's also a freelance recruiter. So we'll have also perspective from someone who is hiring freelancers, particularly for companies. And Ian, he's a co-founder of Cherry Pickers, and Cherry Pickers also helps hiring freelancers and manage contingent workforce for companies here in Belgium. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good to have you.
Yes, glad to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. Yay. So let me get started. I have prepared lots of questions, and people who are watching us, don't be shy. Drop your comments and questions in the chat as we go along. If we manage to address them, we'll do on the fly. If not, we'll bring them up at the end. And yep, let's get started. So I'd like to start from far. And from far is thinking in terms of what sort of changes corporates need to make in terms of hiring people and managing the scarcity of talents. We know it's they can do it with freelancers, but what else they need to take care of? Ian, why don't you start first?
Okay, I will kick off for today. Yeah, you said you will start from far away, so I will try to answer also in a holistic way, because in my opinion, where it starts within companies is that we already start with the terms internal talent and external talent. So we have an internal workforce, external workforce. I think we should look at humans in another way. So it's actually, we also talk in Belgium about in other countries, human resources. Resources is not the right term for people working within a company. So let's start off with talking about human capital, the human capital that people can bring to a company. And let's stop with determining that people are internally or externally. I think some of the companies are trying to change their vision on how to attract human capital. They're really stopping to hire on a contract basis. As you know, the most of the people who are hired or recruited within a company is with a fixed contract, a permanent contract. In Belgium, we have also temporary workers, and of course, we have also the freelancers. So that are the three main contract bases in Belgium, for example, to hire people. I think we should turn that around. Actually, we should hire or recruit people on basis of talent and capacities. So if we look at talent or human capital in a more holistic way and just see which talent and capacities we need today in our company, tomorrow, and within 5 years, then we can also hire other type of people. So just not only just the permanent contracts, but also freelance. So let's start to really be with stopping about talking with internal people, external people. Let's see how we can manage as a company to hire talent. And if it's a freelancer, it's a freelancer. If it's if someone on a permanent contract, it's on a permanent contract. So first thing I would say, start with talking about a fixed contract or a temporary contract. Just let us see which talent enables us as a company actually to go first in our business.
Fantastic. Hannah, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that don't know, CXE assists organizations in payrolling freelancers in countries that they're not present in. So that's kind of the angle that I take at this and I look at it. And so pairing it right back and looking at it from the distance, like Alina said, I think you've probably heard this time and time again, and maybe have experienced it in your organization, that over the last 2 to 3 years, organizations are really adapting to more of a flexible workforce. They're now, everything's virtual and their teams are remote. They're looking at perhaps other markets and looking to fill their job requirements that can't be met within their local market. So that's where organizations are now looking at perhaps engaging platforms, engaging via recruiters and freelancers, or through using an employer of record to do so. I think especially now everyone's used to a non-linear workday from being more flexible and working at home. It's easier to work with talent across different markets, across different time zones. So I think organizations are, especially as a global perspective, are kind of adapting to that more flexible workforce, looking at taking in different types of talent. It's okay if they work 8 hours behind you once they get the work done. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a freelancer, especially in this age of digital work, future of work, freelance revolution. So I think it's a really exciting time to kind of, start looking at different types of work and bringing in freelancers into your organization.
Cool. Barbara, since you're hiring freelancers, there is quite frequently a confusion between freelancer, outsourcing specialist or whatever, and interim. What is the difference between these three?
Klopt. Correct. Some companies do not get the point yet on what's the difference of all of them. Like Ian said, you have fixed, you have the temps, and you have freelancers. On top of that, we have outsourcing. For me, the temps are indeed the interim, as we call it in Belgium. Those were basically many years ago, the specialists. They went into a company, they filled the gap that they had at the moment. They were going out again, but they were doing a lot of switches in their career. Some were open to do that the full career, some were only temporary, doing temporary jobs, and then on the outlook of a fixed job or with the intention to stay there. That part today we see as the full flexible ones, the really temps replacing, changing jobs every now and then. If we compare that to outsourcing, outsourcing could, in my opinion, be people working on a project base. They get their salary every month because they're linked to a certain agency that places them onto the job with a different company. For me, it's like a step up. If you have a lot of doubt in starting as a freelancer, this could be a perfect solution for yourself as a freelancer, but you could gain a lot of experience by changing from company to company in other domains and other segments of the work field, so to speak. And then, freelance is a completely other ballgame, in my opinion. We have the entrepreneurial mindset. We want to speed up. We want to learn. We have an image to keep high. So you can honestly not compare the three of them. And that's the example I have to give many times in Belgium to the companies asking for support.
Yeah, interesting. We are asked the same question, to be honest, as a community. Sometimes we do receive a question, what's the difference between the three? Yeah. So great.
I'm not saying that they're, I'm not saying that either one of them is not good. I'm just saying you have to know as a company where you want to put your, you want to go for a temp, it's quite fine, it's okay, but then don't expect the level that a freelancer has today. So it's a decision you have to make as on a corporate level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if I may react to that, Barbara, because actually I think that's in view of the total talent acquisition strategy I was explaining earlier, that's like I think the biggest holdup within corporates to make the right decision is, and maybe Hannah can react on how it's on a global basis, but in Belgium I see that if we're talking about permanent staff and temporary workers, then it's handled by the human resources departments within companies. And if we're talking about outsourcing freelancers, that's handled by procurement. So there is no communication within companies in, okay, we need some activities, or we need some work done within our company, and there is no communication within departments or within a corporate in how can we fill this activity in the most efficient way for our company. So it's really, in my opinion, it's really a struggle within corporates that, it's the contract types are really separated also on an organizational level. Hannah, how is that in other countries?
Yeah, I think it's very similar in other countries. We're seeing the same trends globally. Something I find interesting is that a lot of organizations, they kind of come to us and say, hi, we need to hire this worker on a fixed term basis or on a temporary basis. And then you kind of start to peel back the layers and you realize that maybe this worker has worked for them before and they're now just wanting to move country. And because their circumstances have changed, maybe that's why they're being engaged as a temp worker. And they just don't know what their plan is in the next 6 months to a year. Maybe that's why that worker is being engaged. You kind of find when you peel back the layers that there's a reason behind the temp worker being engaged versus a freelancer, I find. Barbara, I see you nodding on that front.
Yeah, it's all start with them as to what they need, and they start realizing, and they, fully understand, fully agree.
Yeah, what we see is that eventually what companies need to change is also the processes inside and realize who is actually managing the hiring freelancers, because are we considered to be an object as a procurement departments would handle, or a human being? That's an interesting question. And what are the other myths and misconceptions of working with freelancers, Ian, from your perspective?
I think the biggest one is actually the cost. So I think if I speak with a lot of companies, they're always talking about, okay, maybe we want to hire a freelancer, but they're way more expensive than employees. But then when you dig deeper and talking with them, actually they don't understand how to compare the cost, because they make the fault, in my opinion. They take a payslip of an employee, and they take the invoice of a freelancer, they compare it, and it's okay, there's a big difference, but that's actually not the right way to look at it. I also talk about the total cost of ownership you should take into account, so not just payslip and the invoice. For example, when a freelancer is sick, a freelancer is not paid. If a freelancer is on holiday, he's not paid or she's not paid. So that's also some things you need to take into consideration in costs. If you look at the actually the education a freelancer pays for her or his own education, as a company you need to pay for the education of employees, etc., etc., etc. So there are a lot of studies about the real cost of a freelancer, and if we compare the total cost of ownership of a freelancer with an employee, the difference is actually just around 3 to 5% at most, and that's not even taking account the productivity of a freelancer, who is most likely to be more productively at the start of a project, and with more in terms of like, I have to get my job done, and employees are more tend to just do their hours. So 3 to 5% is actually the difference between employees and freelancers, and even not taking the productivity into account. So I think that's the biggest misconception for corporates, and also the biggest struggle for them to realize why they should hire freelancers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly that. I have an anecdotal situation personally when I was contacted by an international company to take a job. It was a fixed contract, but we negotiated, okay, I can join a freelance. They were very happy about it. And they said, okay, this is the salary. We just cut it in half because you'll be busy 50%, and voila, you're welcome. So it didn't work eventually. Even by talking to HR, they couldn't get the difference that they have to calculate all the costs. And in fact, I just dropped a link in a chat. We wrote, well, I would call it even a guide almost, how to look at the freelancer cost and employee, and how much it comes under employee. There is a table under employee part, and what freelancer is covering themselves. It's a dramatic difference.
I want to add something on productivity. I totally agree with Ian. If I get a request on putting a freelancer on a specific fixed job that is not easy to fill in, they cannot find anybody, and they ask for a full-time freelancer, most of the times the job could be done in 3 days and a half, 4 days max. So productivity is really that high. And once a company or a corporate starts seeing that, it's of a major impact to the company. Yeah.
And on that one, Hannah, I'd like to ask you, what are the risks? Like, do they mention any risks associated with working with freelancers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's maybe one of the most common misconceptions with working with freelancers. Big corps kind of think, oh, well, they're a different entity and they're their own company, and I don't really have to carry out that much compliance. They're totally separate from me. But that's not the truth. And there's a lot of legislation around Europe specifically that needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at hiring maybe freelancers in other markets. So for instance, maybe a lot of you are maybe sick of hearing this, but in the UK, if you're hiring a freelancer, they have a ruling called IR35, which basically is to look at maybe tax avoidance of freelancers and to ensure that they're not under your direct supervision or control or direction. And a lot of organizations look at that and think, okay, I don't have the processes built out that if a freelancer falls into inside IR35, what now? So it's important to maybe look at the wider global reach of your organization and think, is it worthwhile getting maybe legal teams in other countries, using employer of records in other countries to assist you, or perhaps looking at platforms. Platforms as well is another thing you might need to be a little bit conscious of when using freelancers. Is are they asking freelancers for the documents that you need when it comes to compliance? Because they may not be, and you're engaging them through a platform. And then if something goes wrong and the documents have not been checked or ticked off or verified, your organization is liable. So there is kind of a few best practices we can look at of what you should be ticking off when engaging a freelancer to ensure that you're protected, your organization is protected, and as well as the freelancer being protected too, that perhaps you're not misclassifying them in the role that they're taking on, to ensure that everyone is working happily and is safe. So I think a few of the risks, a big one being misclassification, and that's why all of these legislations have been introduced around Europe, such as DBA in the Netherlands as well. It looks at the relationship between the freelancer and the end organization to see there's mutual obligation there to ensure that they're not misclassified. In the USA, if you're hiring a freelancer in, let's say, California to carry out a role, there's a 20-point test to ensure that they're as well not under your kind of direction, supervision, control, and as well as a whole load of EU directives that have been put in place as well for freelancers. So it's just really important to take into consideration when hiring a freelancer that it's not just picking them up through a platform perhaps, and that's the end of it. You need to be checking that everything's compliant and that everyone's protected as well.
Mm-hmm. And in which case, because we do speak a lot about platforms, and it makes sense when you're hiring at scale, right? The platform, probably it's much better because it also allows for additional processes like, invoicing or payroll or whatever it comes. But when, like, what I'm trying to say is that when it's necessary actually to switch the platform, or is it better to stay with a recruiter like Barbara who would be looking for freelancers for your company?
Well, at this moment in time, there isn't really any standards set out for platforms that they have to basically check certain things for organizations. Mm-hmm. So to protect your organization, you should really be checking that the platform is asking for certain things. So for instance, they're checking that freelancer has an entity set up and it's registered with the correct bodies, and that it's registered within the country that they're working in, and checking that they have, a bank account, a company bank account within the country that they're working in, and that the business bank account isn't somewhere on the Cayman Islands, let's say, and you're, doing an anti-money laundering check to ensure that everything is safe. You're checking they have the right to work. I guess that's an added pro of being a freelancer. You can work from from anywhere, but it doesn't mean you can work from anywhere. So checking that, checking, you have the right insurances in place as well. So there's a lot of things you kind of need to check when engaging a freelancer. Do you have the security that the platform is doing that? So maybe vetting the platform, which not a lot of organizations do. So that might be when you kind of look at organizations like Barbara, who might have that added layer of security. So Barbara, I might ask you to jump in there.
Thank you. Yeah, correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, if you're interested in compliance and standards topic, definitely go back to the platform because Hannah has given a wonderful, wonderful, very detailed talk about compliance. I'm actually going to drop a link on Belgium compliance in case you're interested. But if you head to CXC Global website, the link is earlier in the chat. They have many more guides for different countries, which I found very interesting. And I believe Cherry Pickers also has a guide for the checklist when hiring freelancers. I'm going to quickly find and drop it in the chat as well. Right. What else do we need to know when starting working with freelancers, Barbara?
An important thing, a matter that I sometimes bring up, what do I need? Do I need a specialist or a generalist as a freelancer? To me, that's open, but what we commonly see in Belgium is when you're a startup and a smaller company, they usually go for a generalist, an all-round freelancer. Why? They could be, they could work on several topics. They could start with a project, for instance, on implementing a software system, for instance, on HR, and they could continue on finance, on some things there. Plus that freelancer, which is a generalist, they bring in their entire network. So if they need to bring in a specialist on a certain level in a few months' time, that's also possible. What we see is that the bigger companies, they usually go for a specialist because they have some special thing. They have an assignment dedicated for a freelancer to do, and they hardly ever choose for a generalist. So to me, generalist, specialist depends on you being a freelancer as well. That needs to be known if they know what their core business is. And then you go for, what do I really need? Do I need one who could be a freelancer that would work on many things, or do I need a specific one? And that's the main question you should ask yourself. But going as a small company, go for the generalist who can bring his network, and go for a bigger company there you could use or find your advantage in a specialist.
This is wonderful. And maybe very practical question, how to find these companies? Is it recommended that freelancers contact recruiters, for instance, or is it recommended that they just spontaneously send their applications to organizations they like to work with?
Find them. Get to know, work with your network, go through your network as being a freelancer. That's important. Even apply for an open vacancy that is on a fixed term. Don't let yourself push back. Bring forward your added value and keep going, I would say. Yeah.
I think I have actually quite a good example at my company in that point of view. So in contradiction of what I said earlier, I think 6 or 9 months ago, we had an open vacancy internally at Cherry Pickers, and we just posted the vacancy, but it was actually not mentioned fixed or freelance, so it was not mentioned. But indeed, let's be honest, I was actually looking for someone to hire permanently, and indeed a freelancer actually applied to our vacancy, and just we were talking about the possibilities in working together, and we just decided to engage a freelancer, and she's still here at the moment. So I think also it's a change of mentality that needs to be, but because I get what you're asking, Elena, because what can freelancers do? But in my opinion, how I see it, freelancers already do a lot. They work network a lot. They react to vacancies. They're in daily contact with recruiters. I think also this kind of panel discussions are a moment also for us to say that it's really time for corporates to do more and not always look at the freelancer. I think freelancers are really persons who really try to be entrepreneurial. It's really time for corporates to really to have a change of mentality, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's totally true. So folks, if you hear that, do share this session when it becomes available in replay with companies you work with or planning to work with. The more they know about freelancers, the better for all of us. But another aspect I'd like to discuss is that the perception of freelancers and corporate teams, again, from my personal experience, I did feel like being external, not invited to the parties, not that I'd like to be a party animal, but just felt like, yeah, you're not part of the team. So Ian, from your point of view, what companies should do in terms of engaging freelancers as the team members so that they feel part of the team?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is correct, Alina. I think a month ago we had a workshop with a lot of freelancers actually about the topic freelance engagement. And what was quite curious, but not so surprising, is that the most part of the freelancers are really stating, I don't feel like really welcome or at home at the company that I'm working with. It really starts already at the first day. If we take a look at an onboarding process within corporates, we're always talking about the engagement of employees, and so the process is really different within companies. As we see that for freelancer, it's most likely to be just a material onboarding to see, okay, do you have access to the network? Do you have your badge to come in? And what we see with employees, they get a buddy the first day, they get a walk around through the company, etc., etc. And so that's something we notice as well, that there is really a difference between the onboarding for freelancers and employees. So that's the first thing we can change as a corporate. It's really to make the onboarding process of freelancer exactly the same as that we do for our employees. Secondly, and that was really the strangest thing I heard, is that there were in one company, there were certain areas really restricted for freelancers. So there were like relaxation rooms, fitness, etc., etc. And so it was only for the employees. Freelancers were restricted to go to those areas. And that's, again, the mentality issue, because we're thinking, yeah, when we're hiring freelancer, they're too expensive, so they should be productive, etc., etc. So it was quite surprising for me to hear that within companies there are restricted areas for freelancers. Another part that we see, as you said, Elina, is about the company activities, team buildings, or just Friday drinks, etc. Most of the times freelancers are really not invited to that kind of events. So I think that it's really important that we, and that's why I started today with telling about why are we calling to human resources. Let's focus on the human part. And I think when we engage a freelancer, we should really think about how we want to welcome someone within our company, just like we want to welcome someone in our home. So I think all the things we're doing as corporates to feel employees more happy and safe within our company, to retain them, it should be just exactly the same for freelancers.
Yeah.
Or at least leave it open, invite them, and if they don't come, it's up to them, because not every freelancer is accepting your invitation, for instance. But leave it open to them, to the freelancer itself.
If I may play maybe devil's advocate on this one. So a lot of organizations, I think, are kind of scared of inviting their freelancers to the company parties, to the company fun afternoons, or, you know, give them the added perks that maybe employees might have within the organization, such as access to local gym or whatever it may be. When it comes to misclassification, and if a company is maybe perhaps audited, they do look down to, you know, if a freelancer has attended, let's say, the Christmas party or something like that, to see, are they maybe a masked employee and should be hired as such. So I think this is why maybe corporates are doing such. They're scared to have full access for freelancers to maybe all of the additional benefits that might come with being an employee. But that's not saying, you know, they shouldn't be invited to certain things. You know, it's important to make people feel welcome in your organization. But I guess it's that gray area of where the hard stop should be.
Yeah.
How about influencing, because I'm hearing sometimes in my region, they will influence my employees. So that's why we leave them aside.
Yeah, interesting. And Peter has made a nice remark. If there are any HRs in the audience, please let yourself known. We would like to ask you questions about that. But also Peter is raising a good point about transparency, and I think it's an important topic to discuss as well. Well, transparency matter comes in different aspects here. But first of all, about the pay. Now, if we're working with a third party via the platform or a recruiter or whoever plays freelancer in the team, there is obviously a markup that comes into it. So what are the global standards, Hannah, if there is one?
It's funny you should raise this, because right now there isn't any global standards, and that's what these organizations are looking to do. The likes of Open Assembly really implement standards across platforms. So right now there isn't much transparency. I don't think freelancers are aware of maybe the markups that are being added to their fees, or they're not transparent or have information maybe how like algorithms are working and how they're being selected for jobs. So right now there really isn't much transparency, or at least there's not a standard level of transparency across the board when it comes to freelancers on these talent platforms. And that's something that really needs to change, because it's not fair for freelancers, and additionally they are losing out on certain things. Like, it's not fair if they're not aware of how an algorithm would work within the platform, and perhaps they're missing out on jobs.
Barbara.
Yeah. Sorry, just to intervene, because indeed platforms is one thing, but I think the a bigger issue is raised within recruitment agencies, in my opinion. Let's say there are a lot of great recruitment agencies. Let's start with that. But it's not normal that freelancer A will be submitted by party A to a customer, and he will be charged, let's say, 100 euros an hour. And when freelancer A is submitted by party B, it will be like 120 euros an hour. So it's really in the case of which company I'm using, which recruitment agency I'm using, actually has the bigger chance to be engaged by a company, by corporates. So I think there's also a role for the intermediate parties actually to raise the transparency, both for the benefit of corporates, but also for freelancers. So that's also a thing besides of the platforms. I think recruitment agencies also have a big role to play here in the transparency.
I see two major things. One is that the price of the freelancer has been put under pressure due to them asking a tremendously markup. And on the other hand, the corporates get the impression that we rate very high, so that the fee is very high, but that's also due to the markup. So it's a mixture of both, and it could be avoided, to be honest. So yeah, they are way too high.
Yeah, and actually it's to this topic we'll have a next discussion about transparency, so Peter, definitely join that one. We'll talk more about that. And I remember we also had a nice session a couple of years ago about actually a platform, I don't know if still exists, allowing freelancers to see whether the job is coming via like third parties or from company directly, so that freelancer themselves could avoid this hidden gray zones of additional fees that have been charged to the clients.
I think in the Netherlands there is quite a big it's called DAS service in the Netherlands. It's like actually it's for government actually, so all government bodies can really put their requests on the DAS platform actually, where a freelancer can really engage directly actually with the government entities for a freelance job. So I think also on that part it would be great if there would be more initiatives indeed to really collect vacancies actually from for freelancers or for external people on one platform, actually to more be open to engage freelancers directly rather than always going to recruitment agencies.
Yeah. And if we would like to give a last piece of advice to HRs and corporates who would like to hire freelancers, maybe already hiring but not quite good in the process yet, what the first step they should do? And again, maybe I'm looking right now at who should own this process. Is it corporate still? Is it procurement? Is it departmental job, or it depends?
I think historically procurement, and it probably is always going to sit with them to some degree. But I think it's about organizations. The first step they need to look at is maybe changing their internal processes slightly, and looking how they can welcome freelancers, and additionally, how it's going to benefit their team to just maybe change a few things internally in terms of the process.
I think the answer is a bit two sides, because actually what we could do and what we see in a lot of companies is that HR and procurement are working together, and actually the roles are quite well defined. HR then is responsible for the sourcing strategy actually, and when are we going to find someone on a permanent term, when for a temporary term, and actually indeed procurement stays actually responsible for the contractual terms, compliancy, etc. And I think that's the way to go in the future. Let's keep the things that's human resources with everything what has to do with the strategy in recruiting people, because that's their job, and let procurement do what they're good at, and that's indeed managing the contracts and managing the costs and managing the compliancy. So I think as we see within a lot of departments within companies, that's really more flexible groups of people working together is also the solution here. So HR and procurement just have to work together and not separately anymore in the future, in my opinion.
Barbara, in your case, I guess it's HR, because that's who you work with.
It's HR, that's who I'm working with, and also with the departments. I am not involved with the procurement side, even though sometimes I hear them, but I prefer the departments because they know as the best what they need.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Great. All righty. Well, I really enjoyed this discussion. Folks, if you have any questions, we still have about 5 minutes, so feel free to drop. In the meantime, let me tell you what's happening next. We'll have, I mentioned the transparency session, which starts at 10:30 Central European Time. Later in the afternoon, we'll have VP Creative and Digital Marketing from Airbus joining us and sharing how they are fostering innovation with the help of freelancers, again, talking about open innovation and how freelancers helping companies to go to new heights. Then we'll have a live stream on YouTube about building a fluid organization. Lots of insights there from Connie, who is a future of work expert. And we're ending today. It's a long day indeed. We'll talk again about IT market. We had several sessions last week about IT markets in Germany and Belgium. And tonight we'll have CEO from Distributed, which is a platform for tech and IT specialists, sharing how they're changing their approach to the market and winning the game, actually, in many cases. So, all right, Peter is asking, is there a difference in appreciation and perception of the freelancer by the end client, depending on the channel how he is recruited? Interesting. Direct via platform, through intermediary. Through intermediary, we find a fee, or with markup fee?
I don't think there's maybe a direct answer on that. I think it might depend organization to organization on how maybe they treat their freelancers within. I do think, though, maybe as just a side note, organizations that hire through a platform are kind of thinking of the end goal in mind of perhaps getting a task complete, a project live, versus maybe if they're recruited directly, there is kind of maybe that added level of personnel within the process that might just kind of make them feel a little bit more part of a team rather than a resource. But that's just a personal opinion on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also have a personal opinion in what I hear from companies is indeed that the chance that a freelancer is hired actually in the end is way higher if the chain is smaller. So if they get a profile sent, or if a hiring manager gets the profile and it's indicated that's like directly found, actually the chance of getting hired is way bigger actually than through an agency, which is also not correct in my opinion. But indeed, that's a personal thinking process that a lot of people have. Okay, if there's an intermediate in between, okay, where's the personal link with people, and then also again the cost structure in place. So it's also not a right thing to think, in my opinion, from a hiring manager point of view. But I noticed that a lot of hiring managers are more eager to hire directly than via agencies, which in my opinion have a lot of added value for companies. But okay.
Barbara, and from your experience?
And the same line, I could bring something related to freelancers, meaning that sometimes when a freelancer wants to step out of a job and he has hired through a platform or through an agency, they direct through the agency instead of confronting the client itself or start talking with the client. So from my perspective and the view of a freelancer, they choose the easy path instead of going in dialogue with the client, and that's the reason. That's due to the intermediate who is in between. Yeah.
Great. I hope that answers your question. I also thinking from my experience when I was hired as a freelancer, almost on a full scale to the team, and I had to hire freelancers as well for the project that I was running. So that's kind of multi-layer approach with how freelancers are joining the team. And indeed depends. I felt like part of the team, but those freelancers that work on a shorter project, they were just executing the task at some extent.